Well, hello again. This is Tina Wright for Week 2, Introduction to Negotiation, Digging into References, prepared for MPA 545, Conflict Resolution and Labor Negotiation, and led by Dr. Telleria. As a brief overview, I will be covering 4 topics that I investigated: defining conflict, intergroup conflicts, conflict styles, and promoting mutual gains in negotiation. The first topic, defining conflict, can be found on page 3 in table 1-2. There are several definitions of conflict, and I have decided to kind of dig into Keltner's definition. So in Keltner's definition, it says that conflict is an intermediate stage of a spectrum of struggle that escalates and becomes more destructive. So by looking at Keltner's book, Mediation Toward a Civilized System of Dispute and Resolution, he further expands on that and says that conflict starts as a difference of opinion, particularly on distribution of resources or perceptions or cultural values or failures in communication, and that conflict is a larger part of a process that he calls the struggle spectrum. And he provides this struggle spectrum in his paper, this illustration that shows the different processes and the stages of the struggle spectrum. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. It provides a breakdown of the stages of the differences and provides a guideline on kind of how to solve those differences or how they can be negotiated. And this tool can be eventually used to help negotiators determine the courses of action that may be suited to a particular conflict resolution. So the second topic that I found that was interesting was intergroup conflicts, and this can be found on page 21 in the text. And so intergroup conflicts, the reason why this is brought up, it says that group conflicts can be more difficult to resolve than individual conflicts. And part of this reason is because you're making a balance between self-interest and collective interest. And so in Camarita and Lapworth's article, Cooperative Choice Among Individuals versus Groups in an N-Person Dilemma Situation, it shows that the larger the group size, the more likely cooperation will decrease due to defection, and that the larger the group of individual choice will have much less impact on the decision. And so individuals will, by breaking individuals into smaller groups, like those little subgroups, we can increase cooperation. And if you don't do that, you constantly diffuse responsibility, and you may decrease cooperation. So I just thought that was super interesting, that when dealing with large groups, of course, you have different people coming in and having these opinions, and you might find less ability to find consensus. But then at the same time, they also kind of have this, well, it's not really my responsibility, so then they might just kind of go ahead and go along with the group and have this kind of groupthink idea. But in this article with Camarita and Lapworth, they really, kind of say that breaking large groups into smaller subgroups to make decisions really helps the negotiation process and helps cooperation amongst the folks. The third topic I wanted to discuss was conflict styles, found on page 27 in our text. So there are several different conflict styles, and there are 5 listed in the book. But the reference that I chose was Phillips and Cheston's Conflict Resolution and What Works, and they have 4 different conflict styles. The book and Phillips and Cheston both agree that problem solving is the best method when you have problems with communication, and that works most effectively. But unlike the book, the article that I read said that forcing, most companies out of these 52 companies that were given problems and looked at, 23 of them actually use forcing as a method of solving problems. And going back to our early discussion on integrative and distributive conflict methods, or we kind of go the integrative, where you kind of have a win-win in both situations, and the distributive is a win-lose. And I kind of feel like that forcing is kind of a win-lose situation, but there are reasons for that. One of them examples used in this was that an international shipping company was required to use certain pallets, and so required all 4 of their international companies to use certain shipping pallets, and that it was forced upon them, the negotiation or agreement was forced upon them. But by the end of a year, they had better shipping methods, more easy logistics, and the company was saving money. So there is a call for that kind of forcing or win-lose distributive negotiation tactic. So for my final topic, I chose promoting mutual gains in negotiation. This is kind of found on page 48 and 49 in the book. And this is where we want to, build some mutual gains within the disputants. And the particular one that I chose to focus on was trust in the business negotiations. Shapiro, Shepard, and Chereskin in Business and a Handshake go through these 3 stages of trust: deterrence, knowledge, and identification. So deterrence is kind of like where you really have to believe in the other person's word, and you have to believe that they are going to uphold their word, because if they don't, the harm that is done to them is greater than any kind of risk they're taking in following and keeping up with their word. So kind of like the do no harm thing. Knowledge is kind of getting to know, build that trust through the knowledge of their goals and their needs, and coming from a state of understanding their goals and their needs as well as your own. And then identification is where you completely can see from the other company's point of view or the other disputant's point of view, and you now have shared goals and shared goals and kind of negotiation of where you want to be in this tactic. I think this is all very interesting because at different stages of negotiation, you may only need certain relationships. And Shapiro, Shepard, and Chereskin kind of really go into that as your business develops and grows, you may need to reevaluate these trust relationships and either bring them up a notch or take them down depending on the need of the negotiation that you have at the time. I just thought that was pretty interesting that, these things can be dynamic and change continually as you're getting into relationships with disputants and negotiations. Well, that wraps up my presentation for today. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to reviewing your presentations, and have a blessed week.